Wednesday, February 17th. First off, I would like to go ahead and amend the agenda to add the gentleman here from Red Bike. That's my fault that it was left off. So if you guys are okay with that, I'd like to put it after existing park updates and between 3 and 4. All right. So I'll go ahead and start with number one item on the agenda here is Citizenlink Projects. The folks from ASAP Norwood and Norwood Together weren't able to be here today, so they gave me a little update to read out.
Cool.
So ASAP Norwood and Norwood Together are collaborating to finalize the park inventory assessment, or what we've been called the park audit tool. We had a meeting on Zoom as the park collaboration group, and Leslie Stevenson was kind of going more in depth on that. And what they're doing is they're trying to collaborate with the students at Xavier University to work with them and try to format this thing into like a spreadsheet, a table, to where we can kind of like better read it, and we can put that information out for the residents to kind of see what parks are the worst, all of the best, so we can add them into our capital improvements plan.
Is that like a student group for parks or student government group?
Well, those details I'm real sketchy on. I don't have all the details. If one of them was here, they'd be able to better tell you, but I think it's a group. It's a class that kind of does this stuff.
That's cool.
So it's kind of going to be like a little bit of, hey, you're going to help us, we're going to help you out, give you real life, real world experience with this. So I think it's going to be pretty cool. And we did talk about possibly having to rely on this for 2022 rather than 2021. So, and I'll talk more about kind of what that means in number 3 of the agenda for the existing park updates. So yeah, that's really cool that we're doing that, and we do have that coming. We were supposed to have it a little sooner, but you know, they're trying to look for funding to get this together to make sure it's, you know, not just a piece of paper with a list. You know, it's something professional and well done. So, and then the other update they have is a save the date for March 20th through the March 27th, which is going to be cleanup week, and that's going to be morning to lunch. And the 27th will cover all the parks, so everybody will meet at the parks, and kind of a couple people here at this one, a couple here at that one, and we'll go ahead and get those cleaned up and looking good. And they're going to focus a lot on Montgomery Road as well as other parts of the neighborhood. So,
do you like signing up for a park? You just show up to a park you're interested in?
That Hillary Cannon, she's the one that's taking the charge on that. Again, I don't have every single detail, but I think it'll just be a big group meet kind of deal, is what they've done in the past. I don't know if Mr. Thompson.
Yeah, I've done it before. Yeah, the Montgomery Road cleanup was separate from the park cleanups, but yeah, basically there were sign-ups, and we would just show up and work together.
And then the last update I have also from Norwood Together is the second Saturdays, I'm sorry, in the parks, April to September, morning to lunch. Also, they're going to be doing some cleanup stuff as well in the parks. So those are some good save the dates, some good opportunities to get out and help the parks, help the community, and do all that. So
very cool. And
that closes that item and brings us to number 2, requests to address the committee. Do we have any? Would like Pastor James, you want to speak?
Thank you, Pastor Sonny James, right here in Norwood. Wanted to celebrate the fact that we recently had our Marching Toward the Future March, which I personally intentionally kept it to a much smaller group of attendees, but it was phenomenal, celebrating Dr. Martin Luther King and how we're at least beginning the beginning stages of bringing our community together in terms of all of the communities, in terms of races, racial equity, and things of that nature. We now, with Elevations and Xavier University this past Saturday, which I was so excited. It was our very first Black History Month parade in the history, public parade in the history of Norwood. It was absolutely phenomenal. There were about 80 participants here at the first parade, and that was done on very, very short notice. Our next Black History Parade is scheduled for February the 27th. Now, I will say though, again, typical Norwood, we come together and we have these great ideas and we put out in our yards, Black Lives Matter, but something popped up the other day. I don't know how it popped up, but it was from Deion Sanders, who now is the head coach of one of our HBCU universities. He's the head football coach, and he said something very interesting. He said, it's nice to talk about Black Lives Matters, but really talk is cheap. You can put up a fancy sign in your yard, and when the rallying is going, you can rally from your porch. But really what's needed is that we all come together and we celebrate together what's important to all communities in Norwood. And so Black History Month is going to be celebrated all month. Elevations Enrichment, which is a local nonprofit that works with youth here in the community. Myself as a community advocate, Holly Johnson with Xavier's Education Department. We've put together a calendar of activities, and it's really neat because every Saturday night at 7 p.m. you can go on to www.elevationsenrichment.com and click events, and there'll be a film that your family can watch. And we encourage you to do so because these movies are really, really touching the heartbeat of issues in our country, past and present. The first one was Hidden Figures. If you did not see it with us, please rent it and watch it. This past Saturday was Just Mercy, and wow, that was phenomenal. And this coming Saturday at 7 p.m. is Something the Lord Made, followed by the following Saturday, which will be Loving. We have Cooking with Soul, teaching people how to cook soul food. And you can log on and learn how to cook soul food. And at the end of the month, someone is going to receive a $50 gift card to a local soul food restaurant. And it's really gaining a lot of excitement and interest. And to be honest with you, a lot of the African American community still doubted that it would even get any support in Norwood. So let's prove the naysayers wrong and let's support it. And then on Wednesdays, you can go on and you can learn Black cultural games, like board games, like Mancala, spades, things that are fun, that have been celebrated in our culture for years. I just really want to encourage everyone to get ready for February the 27th at 3 p.m. We'll meet at Victory Park, come together and celebrate. And so that to answer any opposition, we're going to have cars with Black History banners all plastered all over them, and they're going to travel every street in Norwood so that the Norwood police doesn't have to say we're violating any ordinance. Cars are allowed to drive up and down the street every day. So they're going to have banners on with balloons, and they're going to just travel every street in Norwood and honking and celebrating. And so we ask that you come on out and celebrate with us. And then we'll have folks actually a part of a parade, but we're calling it our Sidewalk Parade. So you'll be able to be on the sidewalk where it's nice and safe, and you'll be able to celebrate Black History Month with us. And guys, I just want to say, again, echoing what Deion Sanders said, we got to come from behind the signs. And, I'm urging City Council to come out and support. We were so pleased to have Mr. Gabbard, who came and celebrated with us. And I know that I sent out a flyer to everyone on council, but I haven't gotten any responses. Sent a request for a proclamation to the mayor and didn't get a response. And so, guys, Black History Month matters. Is very important to the culture of many, many residents in our community. If you didn't get a flyer, please let me know and I can email you one. Or if you want one, you can call me at 513-487-8843. Guys, let's celebrate. Black History Month is a wonderful celebration. I want to thank Mr. Thompson for putting it on the official agenda item to be recognized publicly, but that's not good enough. We got to come out. We got to come out together. And so I'm prayerful that February the 27th, we're really going to rock, and we're going to show what Norwood is all about. God bless you all, and we'll be looking forward to you celebrating Black History Month in Norwood.
What time is that on 27th?
It's at 3 p.m. We'll be meeting at Victory Park like we have done with our Hearing Every Perspective meetings, and we'll probably end up coming back there and having some Black-owned businesses and entrepreneurs sharing some of their brands and some of what they offer as well.
Thank you.
All right, God bless you guys.
Are there any other requests to address the committee on, that's not speaking on the agenda item?
I don't know, did you have red lights? I don't know if that was on the agenda.
We amended it to put it on there.
Perfect, awesome.
So, all right, so if not, we'll move on to number 3, which is existing project updates. So I was able to meet with Clint Zimmerman, and we kind of touched base and talked Hunter Park a little bit. So the Hunter Park equipment has been purchased, and they're scheduling the install for that equipment. We're also seeking bids for the walking path, which we're hoping to get going as soon as the snow stops coming down and we can actually work with the ground. And I'm also.
So you're gonna do it the same. They're gonna do it at the same time. The install.
Well, I think the install will probably happen first before.
How long does that usually take? I'm just curious.
Not long. I think when we did Lisa Tanner Park, they were up there for a week.
Cool.
And that was partially, just kind of getting the ground graded and taking other stuff out that was already in there. Since Hunter's kind of more wide open, I think it'll be come in, drop it, and go kind of deal. I'm also getting Clint a list of the other equipment that we still need for Hunter, like the benches, tables, those kind of things. All the other stuff that we kind of talked about and put in the plan there. So that's coming along nicely. Not really much of an update, but more of like an intro to one of the next projects we have that we're looking at, and Clint and I was able to talk about is Waterworks 1, 3, and 4 baseball fields. I was able to meet with him and one of his guys that does the fields, like his lead man on the fields, just kind of talking about what we need to do, what we want to do as far as replacing the fencing, dugouts. I'm trying to fact find and gather like some pictures of some of the kind of things that we're looking for, like the concrete poured dugout so it doesn't get all swampy, kind of like fence look ideas, just kind of what we want. And it was also said too that there's going to need to be some extensive work on the fields as far as the crown of it going into the outfield. Like it kind of gets real like hump there, and that is, they believe that causes a lot of field drainage to be just real poor and swampy as well. So what we're hoping to do there is really get these fields nice, get them nice and level, get some new dirt down on them, new fencing, new dugouts, and just really have something right there in our main sports complex in Norwood that our kids, us, and people that visit from outside of Norwood can really be proud of. So that's something that we got coming up that's really cool. And is there any questions about that or those things? Okay. So that takes me back to real quick about the park audit tool. When I was on the park communication group with Norwood Together, ASAP Norwood, I was asking, because we were expecting this list to be out a lot sooner than now. So when it comes to doing park renovations, park projects, we need to plan, and we got to plan in advance. We don't want to be working on these parks, if we can help it, during the summer when that's when we want our kids to be playing in them. So what we want to do is try to plan before. We should really be planning these now, so when the ground gets softer, we can get in there and get some of this work done so we can open it up by late spring, so that whole summer season they could be being enjoyed. So it was kind of talked about, and I suggested that maybe we rely on this tool for 2022 and beyond, and we take 2 parks off of that and go ahead and start the planning phase now in committee, just like we have in the past. And those 2 parks that I feel like we should look at are Fenwick, which Mr. Thompson and I have talked about doing before, and going down there and checking it out and planning that out. And then Lower Millcrest, especially with some focus on that middle Millcrest area, where you go down there and it's like the little pathway goes up. Yeah, so Donna Lake suggested that one to me. She said it's really bad up there. and I plan on, when the weather gets a little better, going up there myself and checking it out and just seeing what the state of it is. It's not a very widely used portion of that park, but I think just the way it is right now, it's a breeding ground for, nefarious activity, I'll just call it, so.
Well, presumably those were the two kind of top of the audit.
Yeah, so Don, I really suggested Fenwick because I know our Ward 4 parks have kind of really been just put on the back burner in the past. And me and Mr. Thompson talked about doing that one before. And then Donna really suggested Lower and Millcrest. And she's the one that was really taking the lead on doing the audit tool stuff. So she kind of has like a very good idea of which parks are kind of up at the top there. So. Yeah, so that one I think was going to be one of the first, and it's one of our most used parks, most rented parks. That's where people go to have their birthdays, grill outs, all that kind of thing. And we got some really poor stuff going on over there with the equipment on the upper part. So, and that and addressing some of the needs at the bathroom and the shelter area.
I think if the bathroom was done, it'd be a heck of a lot nicer.
Yeah,
That's where all the nastiness comes in.
I agree. It's been like that for some time, so hopefully we can get it nice and get that shelter area kind of readdressed, that little bridge, the walk, the
perfect
railing on that walkway is kind of really bow in there. So I think we can make that park, really pop.
Cool.
So those two parks, I think, will be the ones we'll probably look at and start planning on here in the next couple meetings. So that's really all I have for the existing project updates. If anybody else has any questions or comments or wants to ask or inquire about. No?
What we got done, so.
All right. Expedient. So that'll move us on to the red bike in Rookwood. Correct? Rookwood?
Yeah, just in general. So good evening. Thanks for allowing me to come before you. My name is Jason Barron. I'm the Executive Director of Red Bike. Hopefully you've all had a chance to experience Red Bike, maybe even ride it. But Red Bike is Greater Cincinnati's nonprofit bike share system. We launched in 2014, and currently we're in 4 cities, so we're all throughout downtown Cincinnati, kind of over the Rhine, up around campus, and then we're also in the river cities of Covington, Newport, and Bellevue. So we're kind of condensed in that urban core, but we're always looking to grow. The Wasson Way gives us a really interesting opportunity here in Norwood. Some just quick background about Red Bike. Like I said, we launched in 2014. We got about 500 to 600 bikes. We've got 59 stations throughout that area I talked about. In 2019, we had about 106,000 rides. It was our busiest year ever, so we really saw some good ridership that year. Last year was down a little bit. We were actually shut down for 2 months with COVID. Everything was weird last year. But once we reopened, we experienced part of the bike boom that I think you're seeing nationally. I'm guessing you were seeing a lot of folks riding bikes around Norwood, certainly on the Wasson Way. You can't even buy a bike right now. There's such an interest in biking because what are you gonna do? You can't go to the ball game, you can't go to a restaurant, but you can't go out and exercise and ride bikes. And Red Bike, we were happy to kind of be there for folks and help them get through that. We also have kind of a nationally renowned equity program. We like to call it the best bike share equity program in the country. It's called Red Bike Go. Last year, over 25% of all Red Bike rides were taken by members of our Red Bike Go equity program. So it's our effort to really make sure that everybody in the community is getting to use and experience Red Bike. So we're really proud of that. And I'm happy to answer any kind of specific question you guys have about bike share in general. Obviously, it's something I can talk about for a long time. When it comes to Norwood and this opportunity, I've got to say that the mayor's office through Tom reached out to us a couple months ago and said, hey, Wasson Way is up and running and growing by the hour, it seems like. Might there be some opportunity to partner with Norwood to get some Red Bike stations along that? So the folks in Norwood, and quite frankly the folks in Cincinnati, are really the folks throughout the region that are coming down to Norwood and down to this area to ride the Wasson Way can take advantage of that. We've specifically met with some community folks, part of the, I'm going to get the name wrong, but it's the Norwood kind of Boosters Association. And we met with the folks at Rookwood, and we've met with some other folks to look at some specific sites along Wasson Way, specifically on the Norwood side where it would make sense. We identified a couple different areas. Some of them are in communities that I think could make some good sense where they would kind of be, obviously Norwood is that northern edge of the Wasson Way. But a couple spots kind of where some Norwood streets butt right into the Wasson Way could be good opportunities for bike share stations. And then we also looked at Rookwood, specifically behind Whole Foods at the bottom of the. And if you look at it, you might not notice it, but it actually has what's called a bike runnel, which is basically a channel that you can walk your bike up the steps. We met with the folks at Rookwood, Heinz, which is the management company that owns that specific part of Rookwood, and they're definitely interested in that as an amenity. Tom and I had walked around and kind of picked out a spot we thought would make sense for it. We showed the people at Heinz that, and they also agreed that that would be a great spot. It's basically a couple parking spaces that are right next to that, right next to those steps. And so I'm kind of here to give you guys the lowdown, answer your questions. I think we're kind of at the very beginning stages of this. Typically, a red bike station costs between 50 and 60 grand, and that includes bikes, which is kind of the biggest impediment we've had to expanding. We've been really lucky to partner with the cities we've expanded into to kind of put together a fundraising plan. Specifically, when I think of Norwood, I think of what we did in the 3 river cities of Kentucky, where we kind of came up with, we worked with the city administration and with the council to kind of set here's the goal. We want to have X number of red bike stations. So in Covington, they were like, we think we need 6. In Newport, they were like, we want 4. Although they had then applied for a federal grant, we added 3 more. And Bellevue was like, we think 2 will be perfect for us. We then got a bid for that, kind of like, what will the budget be? And we came back to them and said, here's what we got to raise, because like I said, we're a nonprofit. We don't have any kind of capital funds. In fact, we're always looking for corporate sponsors and philanthropic partners just to pay for our staff, to take care of the bikes, to make sure everything kind of runs on, all the trains run on time. And so, this is the, kind of the next step of that conversation, which is, we've talked to the administration and the mayor, we've talked to some community activists, but, my background is in city government. City councils are where it's at, and they kind of make the final decisions about where the city's going to go. I enjoyed hearing kind of like what parks you're going to pick out to work on, because these are the parks that you guys think need the priorities. So like I said, generally about 50 to 60 grand to put in a station. However, we have an opportunity, and the interesting opportunity that's kind of a short one is that, and this is very much minutia, but the company we buy the bikes from originally bought a ton of bikes that were made with non-US steel. They bought a bunch of those bikes. However, a bunch of those stations. However, most bike share stations are funded with federal dollars. Federal dollars require you to use U.S.-made steel. So they've got this backlog of stations that they aren't selling, and so they have discounted them. And so there's now an opportunity to buy stations for about $20,000, give or take. Again, we got to get a formal kind of bid of how big do we want the station and everything like that. But that's an opportunity that we might be able to take advantage of. Now, they have a limited quantity. I mean, I think it's a lot, but if somebody were to come in tomorrow and say, we have $1 million, we want all your stations, they would be gone. But for a limited time, we can get stations for basically, 33 cents on the dollar, considering that they're usually about 60 grand. So we think that's a pretty cool opportunity. We got to put together the fundraising plan. We got to find out some direction from council about what you guys want to see in Norwood. But that's where we're at. Red Bike is excited to kind of enter into this partnership and to kind of look for opportunities. We think it could be a really cool opportunity.
I had a question here.
Of course.
Is the 20K, the station is $20,000 with bikes, right?
Correct.
Okay. And when you talked about the fundraising plan, is that because typically your model is to give us, the city, a blueprint for which they go out and either themselves or raise it from grants or whoever?
So, exactly. I mean, we did, quite frankly, we did the same thing with the city of Cincinnati. That initial build out, we had a plan that we took to the mayor of Cincinnati, and right after he was elected in 2014, early 2014, and said, here's kind of our vision. Phase 1 would be about 21 stations. Phase 2 would be about another 14 or so stations. The initial part was going to be downtown. The second part was going to be uptown. Mayor Cranley said, look, I'd like to do both right now. So, cool. Well, the fundraising plan changed, at the direction of the administration. And so, and then we put together a plan. We went out and raised some money from some big foundations, and we raised some money from the city of Cincinnati. But then we went to those other cities that I think would have more of the size system we're going to look for. In Covington, we were able to find some big companies that said, and big foundations that said, here's some big chunks of money that's going to get you over the line. In Newport, we found a little of that. We had one company specifically that stepped up with a $100,000 donation. But then that was still only going to get us to about 3 stations, and the community really wanted to have a 4th station. So there was a great volunteer that went out and went business to business, right? And we're not talking like, P&G, we're talking like Susie's Coffee Shop, and said, I need $500, I need $250, what can we do? And she raised 30 grand to get us that additional station. And then Bellevue was similar to that, except without any of the big companies. So they raised a nice amount of money just from individual donations, but the city of Bellevue, actually, even though it was a smaller city, had to put in more money to fund the whole system because of the lack, they didn't have as much of a corporate base. So each system has a different fundraising model.
Yes.
You know, we don't really care. We want to just get stations on the ground and get people riding bikes. So however you guys, you know, if you guys want to just write a check today from Norwood, then that's the easiest. We can order stations tomorrow and start working on it. But, you know, we're willing to work with you to put together whatever plan needs to be done. And I'm willing to go meet with folks and talk to folks and kind of lay out the vision wherever it needs to happen.
So one of my questions was, you know, what would Red Bike need from Norwood to make this possible? And it kind of sounds like just kind of like the hey, yeah, we want to partner with you guys. With not just a financial commitment, but hey, we want to partner and let's help raise money for this. Like, who would be the kind of in charge of that money-making fundraising? Would that be the city's responsibility? Would that be you guys? Or
I mean, we can handle it however you'd like. You know, ultimately the dollars need to come to us to buy the stations. You know, if for whatever reason there were certain restrictions where you needed to pay directly for the stations, we could probably work something out. You know, like I said, I'm willing to attend any meeting or help out in any way. I'm certainly willing to do the accounting. If you wanted donations to come directly to us, we could find all that accounting and make sure everything was documented and you knew it was going to this project. You know, we can really do it however you want to set it up, whatever meets your needs.
Have you spoken with Xavier at all?
So we've spoken with Xavier a couple different times about Bikeshare in general. Haven't spoken to them recently. Most recently, I think you'll remember about 2 years ago, they went with Lime Bikes, and they had those kind of green bikes all over campus for a couple months. Unfortunately, that kind of for-profit bike-share model didn't really last nationwide. We saw spikes of that. Dallas had like 20,000 of those bikes. I know you guys had maybe 50 or so, but they just weren't making any money, which, you know, we're a nonprofit. We kind of know we're not making any money. You know, we're out to just do good in the community. So you saw those go away real quick. We haven't approached them since then, but we definitely be open to that.
I'm just, the only reason I ask is because they're sort of at the moment, the trailhead for
Yep.
Wasson
When I
Way.
believe they're
And
about
we might
to-
be able to get more, like
Yep.
Xavier could help fundraise for one or two close to that, and maybe we could help stagger along where our streets meet with Wasson Way. I'm just trying to think of ways to
absolutely.
make it more successful
Yep.
and broader. And
I believe
I can also see students being a huge beneficiary of that.
I don't know what the timeline is, but I believe the connection from where it currently terminates in Montgomery to Listerman's, basically, where then it's going to cross over and eventually get to UC. I believe that portion of it, the portion from Montgomery to Listerman's, basically, is going to be on Xavier property. There's currently that wide sidewalk there, but I think they're actually going to put some trail in that will be part of the Wasson Way right through there. So I think there's some good opportunity there.
Could you talk a little bit about how Red Bike might be different than the Lime scooters and things like that we saw around here for a short period of time?
Yep. So Bikeshare in North America, kind of this modern, use the internet, use like a digital locking station, started in around 2010 or so, in cities like Denver, I think Minneapolis and DC were the first three. And it's kind of spread since then. Like I said, we opened in September of 14, so we were kind of middle of the pack, and you've since seen it where now almost every major city across the country has Bikeshare. In 2017, we started to see kind of for-profit dockless Bikeshare. And that was, you know, what you saw with Lime. There were a couple other big companies that did it across the globe, really. If you Google Chinese Bikeshare, you can see where they had just a proliferation of millions and millions of bikes all throughout, you know, some really dense cities as these companies were trying to gain market share. Ultimately, what we know, which is managing a fleet of publicly used bikes, I mean, you know, you guys talk about taking care of playground equipment that you know stays where it's at. You know, these bikes go anywhere, right? We've actually come up here and claimed a couple of bikes that have made their way up into Norwood after being found, my guess is. And we've taken them back and fixed them up and got them back out into circulation. But managing a fleet of bicycles is difficult. and it costs a lot of money. And so there's no real money in it. And I think there was a belief by some venture capitalists that they were going to be able to make a bunch of money doing that. At least for the biking portion of that has seemed to have played out nationally as no one's investing in that anymore. You don't really see a lot of for-profit bike share companies. There's still a couple that are around. Mostly they've switched to an electric bike model, which we also have in Cincinnati. So we'll see how that plays out. Obviously the scooters are still doing better, and those companies seem to be thriving a little bit more. It'll be interesting to see how the pandemic plays out with that. Certainly there are fewer scooters in downtown Cincinnati than there used to be, but I think we might see kind of a relaunch once things start to open up this spring. So I think the jury's still out on that a little bit about how that will play out. But Red Bike specifically is a nonprofit, and so we are a local nonprofit. We buy all of our bikes from a company called B-Cycle, Bikes and Stations. We get our software from B-Cycle. B-Cycle is a subsidiary or a smaller company under Trek Bicycle Corporation, which is the largest American bicycle manufacturer left in existence. Most bikes are manufactured by Chinese companies or other foreign companies at this point. But Trek's been a great partner to us. But again, we're locally formed, our board's all local, and we manage the system that way. We make about 35 to 45% of our revenue from people using the bikes, kind of fare box recovery, as you think about like a bus system. And that just depends on the year. And then we make up the rest of those dollars either through grants that we apply for or sponsorship dollars. UC Health is a huge partner of ours and has been our presenting sponsors from the beginning. But we also have smaller partners like True Partner Credit Union and others that have helped keep us alive and keep us keeping these bikes in good shape.
And I think one thing that might be worth noting to residents is that the dockless concept is a little bit different too. Like
Correct.
That's
Yep.
a real, to some, it was a concern.
Yep.
To others, not so much, but some people were. So
exactly.
It's making sure that might not.
Yep. So what Red Bike is Red Bike is dock bike share, right? Which means now it is still possible for someone to leave a bike in someone's front yard or leave it in a parking lot. If that happens, there's a number on the bikes. We can't wait to come get those. So please call us. If you ever see a Red Bike anywhere, we're happy to come collect it. But responsible users, which is what 99% of our folks are, leave the bike at the dock, right? And so you start your trip by checking it out from the dock, either using our mobile app, using your member card, or just swiping your credit card and taking off. And then you end your trip by locking it back in. And when you lock it in, it'll beep, and the technology reads the bike and says, this trip is over, and then that kind of ends your trip. And so what that does is it provides a lot of order for the community, which I think is a real advantage. But it also provides some predictability to the user, right? So if I'm going to the Lawson Way and I want to ride a Red Bike, I don't want to go to the Lawson Way and wander along the Lawson Way until I find one that someone is done using. I want to go to where the station is, know there's a bike there, be able to look at the app beforehand and say, oh, there's a bike at the station, I'm going to go check that bike out. I think that makes a lot more sense. It certainly controls costs, which is a big advantage to a nonprofit. And I think it certainly was one of the challenges that the dockless bike share faced. I did a lot of research when that was happening. I went out to Seattle, I went to Portland, a couple other places that had it, and the bikes were just all over the place. You know, the scooters are in a lot of places in Cincinnati, but there are cities like Austin, Texas, that had upwards of 15,000 scooters at some points. And so they really were all over the place. But we hope to be a little bit better partner than that and kind of offer some of that predictability.
Thanks for that.
Well, if there's no other questions, Tom has been my chief point of contact with the city. I'm happy to sit down with anybody on a quick Zoom call or you know, go for a walk on the Lawson Way. I wore my boots, so I'm not afraid of the snow. And we can show you where we have some of our ideas for where we want to put this. We can start to talk through some specific ideas. But you know, if we act quickly, I don't see any reason why we can't get something done in the spring and be ready to roll for the summer and for the warm weather months. So thanks so much for your time. It's been a pleasure talking to you guys.
Thank you.
Great.
Yeah.
Actually, I wanted to get this to you as well. This is from Blake Mines. She told me to drop
Thank
it off.
you.
You're welcome. Yeah, so I guess the initial idea here is we had talked to Heinz. They're willing to put in a few $1,000s potentially because they want to see this happen. It would help with the retail. You know, retail is struggling a lot right now. And putting it by Whole Foods, the other thing with Red Bikes, they have a little basket on the front. So you could get some groceries, put it in the front of your basket, take it up the runnel, and you know, go on Lawson Way. So that was one spot that we kind of strategically thought made some sense. The other spot we've kind of been thinking about is over by School Outfitters. They've been a pretty good community partner, and that's another spot where the trail really runs through Norwood. So those are kind of the two spots like right now that, really off the top of my head. But I just wanted to throw that out there, that Heinz is willing to make some monetary contributions as well to make that happen.
Yeah, this is for either of you. I probably should have asked it before. I suppose a challenge that might exist with the docking concept is if I wanted to go to Whole Foods and I picked up my groceries and I traveled to my house or something like that. So presumably, if we wanted to do something by the Wasson Way, we'd probably want something more than two.
Right.
You know what I mean?
At least
for
two
exactly
to start
that
off
reason.
with. Yeah, so you got one spot to go to and another spot to.
You've nailed it, yeah.
Yeah.
So,
It would at least help you transport your groceries, even if you had to bring the bike back afterwards. You wouldn't have to carry them as you walk, so.
well said. I was just trying to demonstrate the point that I think that it does require you to come back.
Yeah.
And I think that's what, hopefully that people got that, but.
And kind of the other hope as well, I mean, there's a ton of parking over in Rookwood. You can park your car, grab the bike, hop on the trail, come back, and, I mean,
Yeah.
they have so much parking they don't know what to do with. So
Yeah.
it's a good way for them to get people to drive by and be in the center, and it's a good way for Wasson Way to get exposure. It kind of works for everyone, so.
Yeah, I mean, I like it. I think it definitely is going to, boost that whole biking friendly aspect of Norwood that we're trying to do, and then along with the Wasson Way area as well. What I'm more interested in seeing in the hopefully near future is how that monetary contribution from other people plays out, so we actually know exactly what we're looking at.
Absolutely.
And kind of weighing those options. And I think you said at least 2 stations to start off with is what we're looking at? Okay.
And so my hope, I mean, if we can try to, I'm just throwing a number out there and nobody's committed to anything, but if Heinz would put $10,000 in and, School Outfitters would put $10,000 in, that makes it a little bit easier to, try to make up the difference at that point. Then it's $10,000. City might be able to throw in a few thousand, and we might be able to find a few other partners, so.
Yeah, definitely gets it rolling faster.
Absolutely, so.
Thank you both. That's cool.
All right, so that'll take us to, I believe we have a representative here for our next item is Wasson Way extension into West Norwood.
Thank you. Good evening, everybody. My name is Rachel Cully. I am the Trail and Bikeway Coordinator for Tri-State Trails. And we were invited here to speak tonight about the Norfolk Southern Railway corridor on the west side of the map here as a potential trail opportunity connecting to the Wasson Way in Norwood. We've been working closely with Norwood, some community members and stakeholders to get some bike racks in the community. So, and we've also been talking about other trail opportunities, which are also listed here on the map. So we're happy to be here and to discuss these opportunities. So if you take a look in the dotted yellow line, those are kind of the more trail opportunity ideas that we've kind of been discussing and trying to float in the community. So on the left, we have the potential rail trail there. It's owned by Norfolk Southern. And then we were here at a community council meeting a few months back discussing the connection on Park Avenue and Floral Avenue to connect to the old US playing card site there to connect down eventually to Wasson Way. So in terms though of the rail trail, one of the just general barriers of working with the railroad and what we've experienced working with the railroad trying to acquire land is that it can be pretty expensive. And difficult to work with the railroad. Usually their request or how much they ask can be quite high. That's about the piece of trail that we've lined out here is about 1.2 miles long, and it ends at Tennessee Avenue because I think north of that the rail yard is an active rail yard, so the part south of it isn't active. But that probably, usually a mile of trail costs about $1 million, like baseline. So like if you look down at the bottom there at the line highlighted in yellow, that's the Wasson Way at the bottom. Just like that existing solid black line on the bottom, that piece right there, I think cost the city about $12 million to fund. So there are funds available for you to acquire the land if you wanted to build trail on the rail yard. It's through the Ohio Public Works Commission. It's called the Clean Ohio Fund. And if you were to be awarded that money, you would then have to hire a land surveyor to like see the value of the land, and then you would have to go from there, and that would probably only fund 75% of that land, to acquire that land. So then the railroad still might ask you for more money in the end. So we really, like, for now, are recommending the Floral Avenue connection and Park Avenue connections. But if you have any questions about, you know, potentially going with the rail trail, we're happy to, you know, support and help with that. But there's more money available for a connection like through Floral Avenue to get to Wasson Way versus the rail trail connection there. So if you have any questions about that, or yeah, I'm happy to answer questions about any of that.
You mentioned possible like funding up like 75%. Who is that through?
That is through the Ohio Public Works Commission. It's called the Clean Ohio Fund. It's different than the Clean Ohio Trails Fund, which is kind of like a more common, but it's through the Ohio Public Works Commissions.
So for the floral and forest connections, do you see that, of course, those are existing streets and sidewalks. Do you see that
Yes.
as just being marking streets to have that be a more accessible?
Yeah, that's totally up to you all in the community. If you feel those are really wide streets, like in our opinion, we feel like there's enough room to do bike lanes there on road, or to widen the sidewalks on the sides of those roads and make them kind of like a shared use path, kind of like to emulate what the Wasson Way is. So a shared use path, the only difference that would create is widening the sidewalk, and then it would be like pedestrians and cyclists could use it then instead of just pedestrians like it is right now. But then you could also add bike lanes to the street if you wanted, and that would just require like paint or bollards or cement blocks to kind of block off auto traffic there. But we would probably recommend doing a multi-use trail or shared use path on Floral Avenue.
In other, were you finished? In other examples of that kind of like extending the sidewalk out, is that the shared use path model that you're talking about?
Yeah. So an example of that like would be probably on Martin Luther King up in Uptown. That sidewalk there near Reading is a shared use path, but it just looks kind of like a wide sidewalk, but really like pedestrians and cyclists can use it. All it is laying concrete there to widen the path.
In that example, did the city just kind of like move and like just build next to the sidewalk? Because some of our sidewalks, I know especially right along the road you're talking about by the Williams area, it probably needs repaired anyway, but often the residents are required to, the property owner is required to make that repair.
Okay.
It sounds like that may not be the case in other places, or?
No, I think with the MLK, if I'm correct, that there was enough space, like enough land. They didn't have to, they were like reconstructing that whole intersection anyway up by the MLK interchange. And so they widened the sidewalk there, and I think the city paid for that. It wasn't onto the residents or anything like that. Yeah.
Okay.
I would imagine if we did something like that, it would become the city's responsibility of maintaining that particular path as opposed to residents.
Residents, yeah.
Yeah, if like that sidewalk then, that sidewalk that became a shared use path is now owned by the city, and they maintain that.
Follow.
And some of the funds available for the shared use path model are more attainable than like the rail yard, the rail to trail model that I just spoke about. So the funds are more available to you now for the shared use path.
And presumably the cheapest though is paint and cement circles, right? Yeah. And are the same level of funding available for those? Or is that kind of like a different pool of funds?
I actually don't know the answer to that question, but I believe that yes, in terms of getting paint onto the street, that would be much cheaper. It's just usually a little more difficult to convince people that, you know, that's another viable option. And with the shared use path, you're getting like two benefits out of it. So you're getting pedestrians and cyclists can use it, versus if you had just a bike lane, only cyclists can use the bike lane that's there.
I follow.
But yes, it is cheaper.
Thanks.
So I have a question about the West Norwood section there. It doesn't sound like it's impossible, it just sounds like it's more of a long-term kind of thing than a short-term.
Yes, it's not impossible. An example for that would probably be the community of Evendale. They've been working to acquire a section of an active rail yard, and it took them about a year just to get in contact with the railroad. And then it's been 2 years since then, and they're just now getting to a point where they can make a deal with the railroad to purchase the land. So it's just, it's a long game. We don't want to totally discourage you from that, because, you know, it would be amazing to have, you know, that, you know, not used piece of land turned into something like a trail for the community. But there just may be more barriers for it now, when you could apply for a surface transportation block grant for a shared use path on Floral like this June. And, you know, so it's obviously up to you guys what you want to do, but yeah, we don't want to squander anybody's dreams with that. But yeah, it might be more of a long game.
Okay, thank you. I mean, to me, it sounds kind of like something we can probably get the administration talking now, getting that ball rolling now on that, and then also at the same time looking into, you know, the Floral area avenue stuff.
Yeah, maybe I missed it, and it's probably me. When you talked about like access to funds, is it a very clear like application that we could go do today? If I wanted to do the paint, like the painting on Floral and things like that, how would I go about accessing the pool of funds? I'm kind of missing that part.
Yeah, so the pool of funds for like surface transportation block grants, things like that.
Yes.
Those are through OKI. That's like state funding that's handed out. So it's like every year it's the cycle. So it's usually early June is when the deadline for those grants are due. And yeah, that's easily accessible online.
Thanks.
Yeah, thank you. I don't have anything else. Yeah, thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, well, then we'll move on to agenda item number 5, which is discussion on new recreation center planning. And I'll just lead with that by saying, so that we got an email from the mayor about a task force he wants to put together to meet with the administration and sit down and iron these details out on like what we're going to keep, what we're going to do there, what we want the structure of the recreation department to look like, since we are kind of trying to champion some new, better thing all the way around with the recreation department. So, and what I would like our committee to do is be able to meet, kind of have our own little brainstorming session so we can provide that kind of opinion, guidance, what have you, to the mayor, his administration. I'm hoping to be on this task force, so he's still putting it together. And I can kind of relay that, but I want this whole committee to have a kind of a say in what happens. You know, that is our business, that is what we are here to discuss. So going forward, I'll have more detail at future meetings about the things that are up for consideration.
Right.
You know, like the indoor pool, outdoor pool, you know, racquetball courts, all that stuff, and we can kind of sit down and look at the cost analysis of it and kind of just give our opinion as opposed to the mayor and the administration, and have a helping hand in this process.
Love it.
So, awesome. Does anybody else have any questions kind of about that? About the rec center, about the...
No, it's not a question, it's a note that I'm glad to move forward, and good for you for kind of being council's hand in doing that. As you go to kind of make their needs or wish list, maybe it's worth asking, is it going to be kind of like a whiteboarding without dollars and then putting dollars to it and seeing what makes sense, or will they be done simultaneously? That's,
Yeah.
I'm not trying to say one way is better, but it'd be good to know so that we
Yeah.
can know how to prepare for our
Yeah,
meetings,
yeah.
our sessions.
And that's something I still think is in the works of creation on this. Still waiting for more guidance from the mayor on, when we're going to meet, who's going to be there tonight. But that's something I prefer, if we're going to talk about doing this, let's talk about the cost of it now too, instead, so we don't get hopes up of, oh, this would
Exactly.
be really awesome to do this, and then we turn around and, well, that's very expensive, So we're kind of looking at these things as we go forward, and that's something, if I'm on the committee, I'll push to try to have that considered right now. Like, okay, we want to keep the indoor pool, this is what it's going to cost, so we can weigh that cost with that action
Well said, Chris.
immediately, so, yeah. Tom, I don't know if you have anything on that?
No, I think
Okay.
that's a great plan, yeah.
Awesome, yeah, so as we get more information on that, about the community center, the planning and these meetings, I'll definitely share that with you guys on the committee, and we'll meet and talk about it, and, formulate questions, opinions that we can take up to them and kind of address there and kind of relay back, and, kind of, especially when we go to council with it, have an idea of what we're talking about. We can, hey, we fought for this, and we liked it because of this kind of deal, so.
Love it.
Yeah.
Great job.
All right, awesome. So that concludes this Parks, Recreation, and Public Spaces Committee meeting.
Thanks, John.